Welcome back to the Point of Order podcast, an inside look at California politics in the state legislature. I am your host, Assemblyman Josh Hoover, and very excited to have back on the program Tom Sheehy with the Sheehy Strategy Group and noted budget expert. Tom, thanks so much for coming back on to break down the budget for us.
Assemblyman Hoover, I'm just delighted to be here. Thanks for the invitation. It's much appreciated.
Absolutely. And, I know we really have you here to talk about the May revise, which the governor announced last week and has sent some rippling waves through the Capitol community and the state in terms of how that's going to impact Californians and how we're going to respond to that and how the legislature is going to manage the conversation as well. But before we get into that, tell us how you're doing. What are some other things you're working on this year, and how's the year been treating you so far?
Well, we've been really busy this year. My partner, Brina Sheehy, and I are glad that we got a really good legislative action day done for 2 days for our client, the California Landscape Contractors. Your staff was very helpful in helping us arrange a picture on the floor. We really appreciated that.
Yeah.
Call out to Brianna. She was great to work with. That was a lot of work, but it was really good because we got to meet, I think, with about 17 or 18 different legislators and their staff to talk about contracting issues in California. All of our landscape contractors have to hold a C-27 license. They're not just the mow and blow crews that you see.
Yeah.
These are guys that are installing major landscape structures and whatnot.
Totally.
So that was great. We're glad to have that behind us. We want to see what happens at the end of this week with the suspense file, see what bills are moving forward and which ones are going to become two-year bills. It's the same old dance we do this time of year, Mr. Hoover.
It is, and we're not even going to get into the appropriation suspense file yet. I think we're going to probably talk about that in a future episode.
Right.
But that really is it. I had my meeting with the chair of the appropriations committee, and I was talking to her about my bills, and I said, so how many meetings? She's 76 meetings she has to do with legislators. They're 15-minute increments, but that's a ton of meetings, right? And so she's just she's got to line out her door,
That's a lot of asks.
Coming to advocate for their bills, and that is always a tough process, I know, for her and for the members. So it'll be interesting to see what shakes out
I
there.
wish you luck that your highest legislative priorities get off the suspense file.
Appreciate it.
And that you get a vote of the full body on the floor.
Yeah, I didn't run too many bills with costs this year, so we'll see what happens there. But also, I saw on your X account for Sheehy Strategy Group, you've been posting about the A's. Have you been to a game yet?
Oh, yeah. My wife and I bought season tickets.
Oh, that's awesome.
Now, we don't make it to every game.
Yeah.
Our goal is to make it to at least one game in every single series this year.
That's fun.
Home.
That's a good goal, yeah.
And some series will go to a couple of games, but that would put us at about 25 or 26 games. And then since we had to buy all 81 games, the rest of them were selling on SeatGeek. So.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. And I'm actually going to go to my first game this week, I think. I haven't been to an A's game yet. So.
Excuse me, I just mean to interrupt.
Oh, no,
you're going to love it. They're really good.
Yeah.
This is a competitive team. They've got 5 or 6 really good hitters. I think their pitching is still a little bit
shaky, maybe.
Shaky.
Yeah.
Okay. But even their pitching, I think, has a lot of potential. But this is a fun team to watch.
That's cool.
They get a lot of hits. They hit a lot of home runs. It's a good team.
Yeah, I think I'm going to watch them play the Angels this week, so we'll see what happens. So I'll root for the A's against the Angels, but I'm a Giants fan, so
if you're there Tuesday night, look for us. We'll be sitting sitting right off the third base side near the field.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, and I definitely look forward to going to that Giants series later in the year too, which the Giants, I have to say, swept them over the weekend, which was pretty wild. So that was kind of fun to watch.
Disappointing to see that. Okay, unless you're a Giants fan.
Well, because I'm a Giants fan.
So then you're happy to see it.
Yeah, I was fine with it, but it was a good series. They are a fun team, and as always, like they put together, a great group of players. So, so let's jump into the stories of the week. So, a lot going on in the last couple of weeks, to be honest with you, and I don't want to spend all of our time on this, but we have obviously a new pope got announced right after my last episode closed out. So, that was kind of a big story that everyone was waiting for, that white smoke to come out. So I didn't know if you had seen that.
I'm really happy. I'm not
Pope
Catholic.
Leo the 14th. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I'm not Catholic, but I have a lot of respect for the Catholic faith, and I have friends that are Catholic. And this is the first pope to be elected since I had a chance personally to tour the Sistine Chapel last summer. My wife and I were in Italy, and we got into the Vatican, and we were able to go into the Sistine Chapel, which is a really, really holy, spiritual, and really strong vibes in that
Yeah.
sanctuary.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I've never been out there, but that had to be a great experience.
It was amazing.
Yeah, actually, first American Pope, right? And from Chicago. So that's kind of an interesting little fact
I
about
hope he
it.
doesn't bring Chicago-style politics into the Vatican.
Chicago, I'd take Chicago-style pizza. That'd be fine. I'd be fine with that. It was funny. I think Colbert or something on late night played he said, you knew the new Pope was from Chicago because he played this music coming in. It was like the Michael Jordan, the Bulls theme song in the 90s. It was pretty funny.
It's cool.
But yeah, no, so exciting news there for all the Catholics. And I think, it'll be great to get to know him over the next few months, see his leadership. Big legislative news coming out of the Capitol. Democratic leadership changed course pretty substantially last week. You probably followed some of this. We've talked about in the podcast. AB 379 by Maggie Krell. There was a lot of shenanigans with that. Just to set the context, it would make it illegal for someone to solicit sex from a 16 or 17-year-old minor in California. This was a loophole that existed in the law that I think most of us thought should not be there. And a few weeks ago, there was a lot of drama around the fact that bill got amended and watered down pretty substantially. And then last week, the felony provisions got put back into the bill and we passed it. So ultimately, very good news. And now that bill is going to head to the Senate. And so I don't know if you followed any of that.
Yeah, I did. And, I was really sad to see what Assembly leadership did. I don't know your colleague, Maggie Krell, but I have a lot of respect for her. I know she was a career prosecutor. Honestly, Josh, I was dumbfounded with what they did to her on the Assembly floor, stripping her off of that bill. And I think the backlash was so intense for the leadership in the Assembly, which, of course, are the members on the other side of the aisle from you.
Yep.
I think they were compelled. Probably the governor called them on the phone and said, what are you people thinking? So I was really sad to see that. I'm glad that they fixed it. Yeah. But I do think that your colleagues on the other side of the aisle took a big hit politically with that because nobody thought that was a smart move. Nobody.
No, and it wasn't smart politically. It wasn't smart from a policy standpoint. Ultimately, I'm actually worried that we're going to have this whole conversation again in the Senate because there's a lot of conversations going on that the Senate is going to have a lot of the same problems with it. And so, I'm really hopeful that we can all come together on this one and just say, hey, no matter what your political ideology, what your, orientation, whatever it might be, because all these conversations are happening around this bill. Minors are off limits, right? And that needs to be part of California policy. And so, it's just very, it's very concerning to me, but I'm hopeful that it's moving forward and hopefully the speaker can start to apply maybe with this reversing course, some pressure on the Senate. So we'll see.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. I agree with you.
I know the governor will sign it. So that's what he said.
We have to protect our youth.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting little poll came out here. I don't know if you saw this one. 54% of registered voters say Newsom is more focused on boosting his presidential prospects than fixing the state. Excuse me. I will say, I some of that I think is a little apparent lately with some of his press conferences and stuff. But I thought that was an interesting poll. So.
I'm not surprised. It seems like a lot of what he's been doing for the last year and a half has been, overtly partisan, running the ads in the red states, debating with DeSantis.
Right.
We'll talk more about his stance on the budget later, but I mean, I'm not surprised to see those statistics at all.
Yeah. Another big story, new study out of University of Southern California, gas could reach $6 per gallon with the shuttering of these two oil refineries. We've actually talked about this in previous episodes about the two big oil refineries that have decided they're going to cease operations in California. That could push gas to about $6 per gallon. And then if they add the low carbon fuel standard increases on top of that, could go above $8 per gallon in California. I hope we don't see that future, but if we do, that's going to hurt a lot of people, and definitely really concerned about that.
It's a big concern. California looks like it's going to lose 2 refineries, and we don't have the extra capacity. And it's just basic supply and demand. If our gas supply, and by the way, for people that don't know, we can't bring gas in from Arizona or Nevada or Texas or other states because you mentioned the low carbon fuel standard. We have very specialized formulation in our gasoline. And so it has to be, prepared, so to speak, or manufactured a certain way. And it's very, very concerning. I'm going to just say one more thing. I think the legislature, I'm not pointing my finger at you, and I'm not pointing my finger at most Republicans. But unfortunately, I think some of your colleagues on the other side of the aisle have been very hostile towards the oil and gas industry in the state. The governor has refused to meet with any of California's independent oil producers in the state ever since he was elected. He's never once met with any of the independent oil producers in the state. So there is just a general hostility towards the oil and gas industry in the state. And I think companies like Phillips 66 and Valero said, we can do better leaving California out of our portfolio. Well, that's a decision they're making that's good for them, but it's going to be catastrophic for your middle income
100%.
Constituents that have to start paying $80 or $90 for a tank of gasoline.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true, and I'm really, I think people are in for a lot of pain if this actually happens. And honestly, I think it's important that we acknowledge this can happen, right? I think a lot of people want to say, well, these studies might be over, projecting that. But the reality is that if gas prices even go up $1 or $2, it's going to be devastating. So, I get, a lot of this comes from this desire, right, to make our state more environmentally friendly. And I appreciate that. But we have to acknowledge that the government cannot create that overnight, right? We need oil to get us to that point. That clean energy future will happen someday, but it's not happening tomorrow.
Well, I know you love your electric vehicle because I've heard you talk about it, but I also know that you're not somebody that would say to your constituents or anyone else in the state, you can't buy a hybrid or you can't buy an internal combustion engine car. I mean, people, the market has to be able to operate in a fair way, in a free way, and it can't be micromanaged by government. If that happens, there's all sorts of externalities, and in this case, those externalities are people that don't have much money are going to end up losing their shirt over the cost of gasoline in the state.
Yeah, and I think EVs have to survive in the market, right? I mean, they have to. I mean, there are benefits to EVs that if consumers decide that they outweigh the benefits of another type of car, then they're going to purchase that car. But that's up to consumers, right? My wife loves her gas car, right? So, I think at the end of the day, this is not something the government should be trying to force. I think at this point, EVs have been out long enough that they can stand on their own in the market, and we need to make sure we're not hurting. Not to mention the fact that all of our road funding comes from gas, which
100%.
is a whole nother aspect of this.
100%.
That if gas goes up $2 per gallon, people are probably going to drive less or try to drive less. Avoid driving their vehicles. You're going to have less money for the roads. I mean, there's a lot of ripple effects there.
Absolutely.
So, what do we got next here? I'm going to skip down a little bit here.
Okay.
So, let's see. So California, this was an interesting Cal Matters piece. California released 15,000 prisoners early during COVID-19, and new data revealed that what happened to many of them. That's the headline. But if you dive into this article here, and we'll put it in the show notes as well, in total, between April 2020 and December 2021, Department of Corrections freed about 14,800 people early. Roughly 4,600 have gone back to prison by the beginning of this year. So not a good recidivism rate. That's about 1/3, right, of folks ending up back behind bars. I think this is, I think it's concerning from a public safety standpoint. But it's also concerning because, Governor Newsom and the legislature always likes to emphasize rehabilitation, right? And the reality is that if you have a 33% recidivism rate, you're obviously not rehabilitating people to the best of your ability. So I think this is something that people are obviously concerned about from the public safety side. But I think we're also not, helping people get on their feet either if we want them to have successful lives after they serve their time. So Definitely some concerning things in here, but I thought it was an interesting study by Cal Matters here.
I agree. I was just glad to see the number wasn't higher. I mean, the flip side is 2/3 of the people they let go managed to stay out. Hopefully those people aren't committing crimes.
That's true, yeah.
But I totally agree with you. We need to do much, much more to prepare felons to survive outside of an institution when they're being released.
Yeah, and you know, also just, you know, this idea that 15,000 people, about a third of them went back, that means there were more victims created, you know, during that period of time, right? And I think we have to be, we've been very generous with our early release credits. I've actually had some legislation on this that, you know, certain crimes should not get the generous treatment that they're getting under California law. And there's certain people that need to serve out most of their time or all of their time that you can't just have anybody, leaving for any reason.
Yeah,
right?
you don't want somebody who's committed a lot of violent crimes and is still very dangerous to get a bunch of early release credits and get out, 5 years ahead of time.
Yeah.
It's just not a good idea.
Absolutely. So this one, you tweeted about this, so I wanted to ask you about it.
Yes, which one?
LA City Council backing the $30 minimum wage for hotels despite warnings from the tourism industry that it's going to devastate, tourism. So tell me a little bit about that, because I know you read about that and you had some thoughts.
Well, I'm glad to know that you saw one of my tweets. I think what I said was this just proves that the Los Angeles City Council has absolutely lost their mind.
Yeah.
Their minds. I'm not going to mention any individual.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it was unanimous or if it was a nail biter on the vote, but I mean, this to me is just insane. Think about it, a $30 minimum wage. Yeah. Now, you don't have to have a master's degree in economics to know what the impact of that's going to be.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, if you're one of the people that are lucky enough to hold on to your job, okay, you're going to get an increase in pay, and I guess that's good for you and your family. But there are going to be thousands of jobs eliminated. There's going to be projects that aren't going to be built. In fact, there's some major hotel chains that have already said they're rethinking their California plans as a result of this. I mean, you can't start mandating $30 minimum wages. No. This is insane.
Doesn't work.
And I don't know what has gotten into those people down there on the Los Angeles City Council. They've obviously spent their entire professional career signing the backside of a check, and they've never had to run a company or meet a payroll and sign the front side of a check. It's just insane. I'm sorry. I just think it's crazy.
Yeah, so the bill was presented by labor leaders, the proposal presented by labor leaders as the highest minimum wage increase in the country would require hotels with more than 60 rooms, which isn't that many, as well as companies doing business at LAX, the airport, to pay their workers $30 per hour by 2028. That translates to a 48% hike in the minimum wage for hotel employees over 3 years. And for airport workers would be a 56% increase. On top of that, this is just in addition, hotels and airport businesses would be required to provide new or increased hourly pay for their workers' health care as well. The package, to answer your question, was approved on a 12-3 vote, which is a huge majority. Yeah. Huge majority of people. There were 3 people that opposed it. But I mean, they just had these devastating fires in LA. They desperately need tourism, right? And to add this burden to the small businesses there, in addition to what they're already facing with recovery efforts and tourism recovery and all of these things, it's just mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, and I don't. I just don't even know what to say about it anymore, because the impacts are going to be substantial.
We have a paradigm. It's not an exact parallel, but it's not that far off. When the legislature and governor mandated a new $20 an hour minimum wage for the fast food industry, as defined in the legislation, the governor was very quick to come out a few months later saying, see, we haven't lost any jobs. Well, now, the studies have come in.
Oh, yeah.
And we've lost thousands and thousands of jobs. I'm a constituent of yours, so I live in Carmichael, so I drive around. I've already seen multiple fast food restaurants that are closed because of that, or closed since that action was taken. I've been into a couple of McDonald's in my lifetime. I've seen they've all converted over to kiosks. It's hard to get any counter help. This is all a direct response. So if you raise the minimum wage so high that employers can't make it work, their only options are they can shut down, they can reduce staff and find ways to deliver the service with less people, automate, use robots, what have you, but they're just going to pay fewer people. They can't, their payroll just can't explode because that money's got to come from somewhere. And if they raise their prices that much, they lose customers.
Yeah.
So it's a really bad idea. I sure hope the council will revisit this because it's going to hurt Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And it's going to hurt the people that can least afford. People working those jobs don't have a lot of options to work in white-collar, high-paying jobs, and they're going to lose their jobs as a result of this. A lot of them are.
Yeah, it's going to be devastating, and if they do revisit it, it's probably going to be because, unfortunately, because people are going to need to be impacted by it first.
Absolutely.
And see the effects firsthand, which is a really tough way to govern. I think we need to do better than that. So, definitely concerned for LA on that. Also concerned for the precedent it might set. Or maybe it's a lesson that needs to be learned, right? And learned that we can't be doing this anywhere else in our state because it's just not going to work. So we'll see what happens with that. Last story, just to run by you. I thought this was really fascinating. They had a forum of all the people running for governor, right, on the Democratic side, which was really interesting. But Katie Porter was the only one of them. And I'm not here to sing the praises of Katie Porter, but was fascinating to not support high-speed rail, to say that we need to stop. I think her quote was, "We need to stop BSing Californians on high-speed rail." Unfortunately, a couple days later, at another forum, she backtracked on it and said some things about how, well, we just need to figure out how to actually build it and do it efficiently and things like that. And this was at a union event. So, look, this is actually interesting. I remember when Newsom came out pretty early on in his governorship and kind of criticized high-speed rail, and then he quickly changed his tune on it. It always seems to happen this way, where someone has some sense about this project that, man, it just doesn't look like it's going to pencil. It doesn't look like it's going to happen, because I don't think it is. And then kind of backtracks on it. So I don't know if you saw that, but I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I applaud Katie Porter for talking common sense, and it's obvious she got some phone calls where she was warned.
Yeah.
If she didn't change her tune, she was going to lose a lot of political support.
Yeah.
Probably from labor unions that are building it.
Yeah.
But, look, high-speed rail is great. Have you ever been on the high-speed rail system in Europe?
I've been on the high-speed rail in Taiwan. Okay. Which was wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, it was great. I don't know if I've been in Europe.
I love trains, and I've experienced high-speed rail mostly in Italy, which has a fabulous high-speed rail system. And I think high-speed rail in California could be good or could be great, but it has to be market-driven, and it's got to be a project that is doable. And this project is really been questionable since the very beginning, and it's high time that our elected officials come out and say that. I think Gavin Newsom made a huge mistake. When he was governor, he didn't own it. Yeah. And he could have backed away from it. Yeah. Okay? But instead, he embraced it, and he owns it. And it's going to be another strike against him if he chooses to run for president. Yeah, it's going to be hard. I think a recent report came out where, because it always gets talked about, San Francisco to L.A., right? Train it, which again, in theory, in a perfect world, that would be awesome, right? But it's just not the reality. A new report says it's actually going to go from Palmdale to Gilroy, which is a much different situation, than LA to San Francisco. That's you'd have to take a bus on both ends. I mean, what do you do with that situation? It's not what voters were promised. It's not what voters thought they were voting on. And then Ashley Zavala tweeted this morning that the word around the Capitol now is that they're about to announce about a $38 billion cost increase. Look, to the system, the high-speed rail project, to the project as a whole, right? Which again, it's another $30 billion after the last $30 billion that they announced. This started as a $30 billion train. Now it's a $130 billion train. So it's really unfortunate. It really is, and it kind of speaks to how we're just not able. I think Katie Porter did have a good point that we're just not able to build big things in a smart way anymore. And what I would say to the labor unions is, look, I would love to spend these jobs, have these jobs somewhere else. Let's build some water infrastructure in California. Let's focus on some other major infrastructure projects. Right. But we need to create the environment to be able to do that successfully. Your colleague, Ali Macedo, had that idea. Yeah. She's been talking about this a ton. That's a great idea. We could redirect a lot of that money to water infrastructure. It would create that, or create, however you want to put it, thousands and thousands of really good labor jobs with good pay and benefits and all that. and we could get something meaningful done for this state that improved the quality of life. But to put it all down the sinkhole here, all due respect to the Central Valley right now, it's a joke.
Yeah, totally. So let's see here. So we've been kind of doing this new segment. I don't know if I mentioned it to you, but I go on the Babylon Bee and I read some of their satirical headlines. I don't know if you ever follow the Babylon Bee.
Not too much, but let me.
It's pretty funny. I'll hit you with a couple.
Okay.
All right. Let's see if we get a laugh at it.
All right.
Geez. The problem is I don't preview them, so some of them I can't read.
All right. All right. You heard it first here, folks.
Let's see. Oh man, this is a rough batch today. New subscription service sends dads a new pair of cargo pants every 9 years. I think that's pretty funny. You know, I mean, that's a little shot at dads there, right? But
yeah. I think I get my cargo pants every 5 years, so I wear them out.
Ghost of Pete Rose bets on Hall of Fame induction. I think that's a clever one.
It had to happen eventually.
So obviously Pete Rose being unbanned, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
Along with a few other folks.
Yeah, he's a future Hall of Famer now.
You know, yeah. Hey, I think, let's get him and Barry Bonds in there. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
You know, they were both great players.
Charlie Hustle, baby. Barry Bonds was amazing, even if he was on steroids.
Yeah, exactly. Study says nobody thinks they're stupid, but many are. I mean, that one's just kind of mean, you know.
Well, that's ridiculous.
And then let's see if there's any. I don't see any other good ones. Yeah, but it's funny to see because sometimes they're political, sometimes they're cultural, and we just get it. We have a good time with it.
Cool.
Let's jump into the budget, though. That's why we have you here. So let's start with this. I'm gonna play a clip from Ashley Zavala,
right.
just kind of setting the stage for it. And then we'll dive into your thoughts on the May revise.
Perfect.
Here we go.
Perfect.
The governor rolled out, as you mentioned, a $322 billion budget plan while bracing for that $12 billion budget shortfall that he and state lawmakers will have to figure out how to close over the next couple of weeks, or months, I should say. Newsom said the state is losing out on billions in cash because of President Trump and his tariffs. But I want to bring up this chart that shows how California's budgets have grown since the governor took office. As you can see, when Newsom first took office, his first budget worked out with state lawmakers was $208 billion. And you see that number has climbed over the years. Today, Newsom's number represents a $114 billion increase from California's budget back in 2019. I asked him about these numbers today. Here's his exchange.
Budget watchers, including the Legislative Analyst's Office, warned that spending could be unsustainable, and even a couple of years ago, the LAO suggested that a reduction in spending could help offset future revenue losses. So with what you presented today and the budget problems you've laid out, I mean, is any of this self-inflicted, or is the uncertainty entirely about President Donald Trump?
Well, we went from a $3 billion trillion dollar economy a few years ago to a $4.1 trillion economy. This nation state has grown, and as a consequence, we've grown into a different approach in terms of our investments. We're also trying to reconcile a lot of challenges we faced. So, no, I'm very proud of the work we've done creating a brand new grade, TK for all.
So he goes on for quite a while there about some of the things that he's passed in the last few years. But that's 7 budgets. From $208 billion to $322 billion. I mean, that's a massive increase, right?
Massive.
And that obviously speaks to the increase in our economy over the last few years as well. Some of that too coming out of COVID, so it's a little skewed there. But
yeah, it is skewed because of COVID. That's true.
Yeah, but give us your take on this $12 billion budget deficit, and what are some of your takeaways?
Okay, couple things. So first of all, just so folks don't get confused, the LAOs. This is a similar situation to January. The LAOs identified this as a $14 billion problem. The difference between the LAO and the administration is similar to what I told you in January.
Yeah.
There are $2 billion in policy choices, mostly Prop 98, that the governor made that he's calling workload.
Right.
And every governor before him in history, back when, before, I was even in this business, when you required the legislature to vote on things, that's a policy choice. So it's really a $14 billion problem, but nevertheless, it is what it is. I have to tell you, I was a bit shocked by the governor's budget presentation. Not so much what he said when he was standing at the podium and he had his director of finance there, but if you go to the governor's, or if you go to the DOF site or the governor's site, there was a handout, there's a PDF you can download or open up that he had on the big screen that he was going through. And most of it is a normal, what you would expect a governor to do, have pictures of revenues and expenditures and where the changes and what are we doing to keep and that's, keep the budget balanced. That's what you expect. But there was a middle part. There was about a third of that and his presentation was all in color, blue and gold and white. Everything's looking great. Then there's a middle part where everything goes to black and white, and there's all these headlines that it's the Trump slump. And he goes on through a whole series of slides to explain how California's $14 billion budget deficit is due to Donald Trump and his policies. And I will just tell you right now, any nonpartisan analyst looking at this will tell you that's a bunch of balderdash.
Yeah.
It's nonsense. Let me tell you why. First of all, he said, this is big picture stuff. He said that their revenues were down over $11 billion in the budget year in their forecast, okay, compared to January. Yeah, but they're up $6 billion in the current year. So if you actually balance that out, it's about a $5 billion revenue issue. Furthermore, the California Department of Finance, and I'm not making this up, they say it right in their documents, that they said the reason why the revenues are down in the budget year is because of a reduction in capital outlay taxes, capital outlay growth in the capital outlay budget from wealthy individuals buying and selling stocks, real estate, businesses, other assets. But the point that they took to run their capital outlay numbers was the low point this year for the S&P and for the NASDAQ. Specifically, they said that their S&P budget forecast was based upon the low point, which was 5,300, which was an 8.2% reduction from where we started on January 1st this year. And for the NASDAQ, they took the low point that was the 13.5% reduction from where it started in January. Okay. Well, the bottom line is right now, they're both back. In fact, both those indices today, I checked before I came here, they're higher now than they were on December 31st.
Wow.
So they took a low point when there has been turbulence from Trump's tariff announcements and policies implementing, because he's changing the whole paradigm. He's trying to get the United States to be working with its trade partners fairly. It's not fair when China has these huge tariffs and won't let our goods in. We can buy Mercedes-Benz and BMWs here in California, but if you go to Germany, you can't find an American car because of all the tariffs. So the president's trying to address that. That is causing some turbulence. It has affected the stock market. But for the California Department of Finance, and everybody that's seen me knows I am the former chief deputy, and I love that department and respect those people. But all due respect, I think they picked a low point to run their numbers. So that's on the revenue side. I don't think that the $5 billion over 2 years is a huge revenue drop. And frankly, I think if they picked a different point in time for those stock market indices, we might not have seen it. But that's speculation. Let's go to what we know for a fact. And this is what really, really concerns me right now about the May revision and what we've learned. Department of Finance has reported, and the LAO is concurring, that the baseline budget that if you look at what the governor said in January about the budget year, the fiscal year that starts July 1st, the 25-26 fiscal year, if you look at what the governor said in January about general fund expenditures, excluding Prop 98, so you take Prop 98 out of the picture, so this is everything else in government that's general fund. If you move forward 5 months now to the May revision, the baseline budget expenditures have gone up $12 billion.
It's amazing.
Now, let me put that in, now that's unprecedented, and let me put it in context. Last year at the May revision, in fact, you had me in last year. The increase in expenditures from Jan 10 to the May revise, again for the budget year starting July 1st, was $2 billion.
Wow.
The year before that, it was $2.7 billion.
Okay.
You can't find another year where it went up by $12 billion. So you don't have to be a former finance official or a budget analyst or have a master's degree in the fiscal effects of government to understand we've got a big spending problem on our hands, a huge spending problem. So now you get to what is underlying that. And the Department of Finance has reported that 10 of that $12 billion baseline expenditure increase is all in health and human services. And most of that is in Medi-Cal. And that's why you were asked this year, a couple months ago, to vote for a $3.5 billion increase in Medi-Cal for the current fiscal year.
Yeah.
Now, they took that money out of cash reserves, and so part of how he balances the budget is he doesn't even recognize that expenditure. Normally, they'd have to repay that in the budget year, so it would add $3.5 billion to the budget problem. But he's doing the same maneuver.
Right.
Remember we talked about the maneuver when I was in for the May Revise last year, how he took a bunch of Prop 98 related expenditures off the books with the maneuver and basically said he'd pay it back in future budgets. That's what he's proposing to do with this Medi-Cal funding he took out. Now, there's a lot of reasons why the Medi-Cal expenditures are exploding, but I don't think we can stick our head in the sand or be afraid that we're going to be, politically incorrect, because the administration admits it in their own documents, and the LAO has confirmed it, that one of the biggest drivers of these huge increases in Medi-Cal are non-documented immigrants.
Yeah.
Now, we're not picking on them, but that's a fact. And they're flocking to this program to get the health care, and it's driving our ability to pay for all of that is becoming greatly strained. And, it's a major policy issue that you and your colleagues and the governor are going to have to really look at. Now, not everything about his budget is bad. I think we have to be fair to the governor. And so if it's okay with you, can I talk about a couple of the good things?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
So to try to balance out the discussion a little bit, so I'm not accused of just being against this governor's budget, I appreciate the fact there's no new general tax increases in the budget.
Yeah,
not only
that's good news. Very good news.
It's good news. The governor's not pushing for it. We don't see a lot of your colleagues grandstanding for it. With all of the governor's proposals as proposed, and if they're all adopted by you and your colleagues, the budget is scheduled to end with a $16 billion reserve in the budget year. That's about half of what it was a couple years ago, but it's still a lot of money. $16 billion is heads and shoulders above where the reserves were back when I was Department of Finance. So that's good. The Prop 98 guarantee is dropping in the budget year because there is this drop in revenues. Right. And so they're going to lose about $4.5 billion in Prop 98 funding. And that's just formulaic. That's not because of a policy choice. But the good news is that the governor is not proposing to suspend Prop 98 and try to get even more savings there. And even with the drop in Prop 98, the administration is still funding it's almost 2.5, I think like 2.3%, a cost of living adjustment or COLA for the local control funding formula. So all the school districts and their LCFF are going to get a COLA, and I think that's meaningful.
Yeah, and I think they've the education folks I've talked to so far are actually pretty happy with the current proposal. So
yeah, I think the governor has protected education, and I applaud him for that. I think that's really, really important. And then one more thing I would just note, to balance the budget, Governor did not propose any additional transfers from the budget stabilization account. In his January plan, he was assuming $7 billion in BSA transfers to help balance the budget from the rainy day fund, and that's still in there, but he hasn't proposed to increase it.
Okay.
And I think that's good because that leaves you additional resources in that reserve we just spoke about that you can utilize in the future. So we already talked about, the big news here that, this is not a Trump slump. This is a spending problem that the state has.
Oh, yeah.
And the LAO, in their analysis that they released over the weekend, they talked about my favorite subject with you, which is the fish mouth.
Yes, I love the fish mouth.
Unless you ask me to, I'll spare your listeners my Schwarzenegger impression. But we used to talk with the governor about the fish mouth, and that is, my upper hand is expenditures and my lower hand are revenues. And when the fish mouth is open, those lines never come together.
Right.
The LAO said that after looking at all the governor's proposals, they said two things. They said, first of all, in budget year +1, if all the governor's proposals are adopted, you vote for everything he's asked for, you vote and approve. In budget year +1 in 26-27, there'll be a $13 billion general fund deficit.
Wow.
In budget year +2, it grows to $17 billion. And in budget year +3, it'll be $12 billion. That's $42 billion.
I was going to mention that's what I have here.
In deficits that we're going to
run.
That's
the out-year deficits, right? Yeah.
And why are we getting all those deficits in out years? Because a lot of the solutions that have been adopted, fund shifts, accounting changes, borrowing from special funds, those aren't reductions in baseline spending. Those are temporary reductions in spending that come back the next year.
Yeah.
And so a lot of, our problem would be worse this year had you not implemented some of the changes last year. But the reason why you see these deficits growing is because the long-term revenues that we're all projecting under current law, they don't keep up with the expenditures. So the legislature and governor are going to have to make some programmatic reductions. That's a fact.
Yep.
And I don't know if I mentioned the percentages. The LAO said that the long-term revenue, looking out over time, on the natural, the revenue growth will be around 4% for the general fund. That comes from sales tax, corporate taxes, personal income taxes. But the long-term expenditure growth, based upon all the laws that are on the books right now, is at 6%. So it's a pretty significant gap between revenues and expenditures, and that's something I think we need to be really, really concerned about. So then the question is, how does the governor balance the budget this year? The governor called it $12 billion. We'll just stick with that. Or no, actually, my numbers here, I'm still sticking with the LAO's $14 billion.
14, yeah.
Because the governor did a maneuver and did some other things. But $9.5 billion of the 14 comes in the form of spending reductions. And of that $9.5 million, $5 billion of that are true programmatic reductions, mostly in the health and human services area.
Yeah.
So that's, it's good that there's some real programmatic spending reductions because we're going to need that. $5 billion is not enough. The other spending reductions came from some fund shifts. They took the greenhouse gas reduction fund, which is supposed to be for environmental projects, and they're using that now to fund the baseline operations of CAL FIRE. CAL FIRE is very important. We need to fund them, but did we really do cap and trade to develop greenhouse gas reduction funds to fund the Department of CAL FIRE?
Yeah, I mean, it's backfilling. I mean, that wasn't what cap and trade was supposed to do. It's also, by the way, funding, according to his proposal. Let's see here, a big amount of high-speed rail, right? $1 billion they're going to send from the greenhouse gas reduction fund to high-speed rail, which we were just talking about. I mean, is this what cap and trade was for? Are we supposed to be spending it on, general operations and high-speed rail versus, some of the priorities that it's supposed to be going to? This budget cuts $200 million in wildfire prevention programs, right, which we desperately need in this state. In fact, when I had Assemblyman Joe Patterson on earlier this year, we did like our predictions for 2025, and one of his predictions is we're not going to do anything real on wildfire prevention in California, and this really kind of underscores that. Right?
Boy, I hope your colleague's wrong, but I have the same concerns you have. Another area where they did the fund shifts to help, again, reduce expenditures. This is back to $9.5 billion in solutions for expenditure reductions. They're diverting the MCO tax again. And of course, the voters voted, and there was a deal in the legislature, and there was a proposition passed, and that money's supposed to go to pay providers more so that we don't lose any more docs, we don't have any more clinics closed. And that money's being diverted to general Medi-Cal case growth because they have such an explosion of Medi-Cal, which we talked about a moment ago. So that's another one. And then there's one other category here which makes up most of the rest of it. There's $4 billion in, this is not a fund shift, this is a cost shift. And the LAO defines a cost shift as a budget action that achieves savings in the present but results in binding obligations or higher costs in the future. That's what the LAO says. And the big culprit there is this Medi-Cal maneuver I touched on earlier. You and your colleagues voted to put another approximately $3.5 billion into Medi-Cal in the current fiscal year because it was going to, they were running out of money. But that money was borrowed from the general cash reserves of the general fund. And normally, in a normal situation, that would be paid back in the budget year. And what the governor's planning to do is not pay it back for a number of years. He's going to stretch it out, just like he did last year with the Prop 98 maneuver that stretched out paying back those funds over a number of years. It's terrible fiscal policy. The reason why this governor is able to get away with it, it's the same thing I said in January. He can get away with it because this may be confusing to some of your listeners. Well, it's true the state has a budget deficit. Its revenues and expenditures are not in alignment in the current, and they won't be in alignment in the future. That's different than our actual cash position.
Right.
It'd be kind of like if you had, $10,000 savings in the bank. If you lost your job, all of a sudden, you still have to pay all your bills, but you don't have any revenue coming in. You've got an immediate budget problem, but you've got cash reserves of $10,000 you can tap. Well, the state of California still has historic cash reserves, and we could have a whole different discussion on how we went from being broke on cash, 15 years ago to now having a surplus of cash. But the whole reason why the governor's able to make this maneuver in Medi-Cal and last year on the Prop 98 is because we're so cash rich. So he's borrowing from that cash internally, but then instead of recognizing that obligation to pay it back in the next budget, which it would be the appropriate and right thing to do from fiscal policy, he's stretching it out over years. It's like long-term borrowing. He's adding a lot of debt to the future, and it will have to all be paid back.
Yeah, the bill comes due.
The bill's absolutely going to come due. I think I've hit all the key points. Just one more thing. Again, it was shocking to see how partisan the governor was in blaming Trump for everything. But he's sort of failing to look at himself in the mirror. He was very quick earlier this month to tout California moving up to
number 4.
The 4th largest economy in the world. Well, when you've got 40 million people living here, right? I mean, but despite the fact that we're now the number 4th economy in the world, according to the economists at the Department of Finance and the Legislative Analyst's Office, if you back out new government jobs or healthcare jobs, you back out government and healthcare from our employment sector, this state has not created a net single new job, not one, in the last 18 months.
Incredible.
In 18 months, if you back out government hiring and healthcare, just those two, but you look at every other industry in the state, finance, manufacturing, agriculture, services, transportation, what have you, we haven't created a single new job. In fact, I'm not saying this because I'm down on California. I love this state, and I want us to be successful, and I know that's why you're serving in public service, but we have a very lackluster economy in this state.
Yeah.
And we have the highest poverty rate in the country. 1 out of 3 Californians are living in poverty, and they're on Medi-Cal, and they have other government assistance just to get by.
Yep.
So we may be the 4th largest economy in the state just by the numbers, but if you dig past that headline, look at the crosstabs, as they like to say in polling, we've got a lot of really, really serious problems. Why am I mentioning all this? Because that's the underlying foundation for our budget problem.
Yeah.
You know, we're having budget problems because the state has a lot of financial issues that its citizens are facing, and that's why there's such a high demand for government services that are driving higher costs much higher, that are growing much more than our capacity to pay for everything with the revenues coming in. I mean, that really is the big picture, Josh. I know there's a lot more minutia we could get into, but that's kind of how I see the situation.
I mean, I think that's a great way to summarize it. And, you know, it's amazing when you look at just the numbers, right? And the governor loves to talk about this 4th in the world ranking, right? But what I always like to ask people is, we'll talk to a small business owner, right? Ask them how they feel about California's economy, not just, you know, what a lot of our amazing big companies are you know, earning in the stock market, or even wages, right? Because you talk about, okay, we probably have more people than a lot of places that earn over 6 figures. But how far does 6 figures actually go in California? Compared to if you were making 6 figures in another part of the state, you would be very, very wealthy. In California, you're not. In fact, there was a story recently on, I think the Bay Area or something, about how, you know, these people are in poverty and they're making $100,000 a year, right?
It's amazing.
Because the costs are astronomical in a lot of parts of the state, right? Even in the more affordable parts of the state, you know, they're going up substantially.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great way to summarize it. Tell me, if you could really briefly, because the governor did sort of make it a, you know, really, when we're looking at this, by the way, thanks for pointing out this $12 billion increase. I mean, it really is
amazing.
unprecedented.
It's unbelievable. You and your colleagues may want to talk about that. Every day they're having a budget discussion on the floor, bring up this issue about the baseline general fund spending.
It's
Setting
incredible.
aside Prop 98 goes up by $12 billion. See, if you include Prop 98, and because Prop 98 comes down by $4.5 billion in the budget, it comes down because of the revenues are dropping.
Right.
Then that'll make the general fund expenditures $4.5 billion less. They can say, oh, you know, it's not 12 billion, it's really only 7.5. Well, even 7.5 would be outrageous. But back out Prop 98, it's baseline budget growth of 12% on 12 billion, not 12%, 12 billion on expenditures. It's unbelievable.
It really is unbelievable. And so in response to this, right, I know you talked a little bit about how he's going to reduce this gap, but he's proposing cutbacks, or I should put that in quotes probably, to this program for undocumented immigrants, right? At some point, you know, requiring premiums for undocumented immigrants that remain on these Medi-Cal plans. But I mean, what does that actually mean? I mean, is he actually, the media is kind of framing it as he's cutting back on these programs, and maybe that's true. But do you see that as like factual in this case? Is he really trying to walk this back?
I think if you look at everything that the governor's proposed as it relates to Medi-Cal, and as you mentioned, there's several moving pieces to that, some premium increases, eliminating new cases for adults after January 26th and so on. If you look at the big picture here, what he's proposing, he's trying to limit access. And it's not just Medi-Cal. He's also going to limit access to the IHS, the In-Home Supportive Services Program for non-documented immigrants, because that's part of where the costs are exploding as well. So what he's really trying to do here is limit access. Why? Because we can't afford it.
Right.
We can't afford it. And it's really unfortunate because we have a lot of documented citizens that need services that aren't getting them.
100%.
And we have billions and billions of dollars being diverted to undocumented immigrants. And I think there is a fairness issue there about people that were born and lived in California, California citizens, and those who've come here as visitors who we appreciate, but should they get first call on all these dollars? I think that's a fair question. At the same time, I know you were supportive of it, and I know the people in your district, and in fact, overwhelmingly in California, they supported Prop 36 on the November ballot, which essentially tried to fix a lot of the sentencing problems that Prop 47 and 57 made, and that have been contributing to all the crime in the state. And while it's true that the governor's budget does fund some of the projected increase in prison population, it does do that. It does not include any funding for the increased workload in the courts. It doesn't put in any new funding for new mandated treatment services that Prop 36 is driving. And it doesn't put in any new money for case management supervision of the treatment mandated felons. Those are the key components to this, right? You've got to give these individuals the treatment and the support that they need, okay? Because we don't want them we don't want them to go out and commit new crimes.
Yeah, totally.
We want them to get off of drugs, and he didn't fund those things. Yeah. And instead, we're getting billions of dollars put into other areas of the budget, but this is something that the voters just voted on, and he's not fully funding it. That's a real problem.
It really is just a slap in the face, I think, to the will of the voters, right? And I think that's what's really frustrating is voters were loud and clear. I mean, Prop 36 passed in every single county in the state with a majority vote. Over 70% of the entire state supported it. And, you know, by refusing to give law enforcement and DAs the tools they need to actually implement it, and not just to hold people accountable for crimes, but also, to your point, to get people treatment that they need. I mean, it is just completely trying to gut the will of the voters through the purse instead of carrying out the policies that they made very clear they want to see. And a lot of that is coming from the fact that the governor opposed that initiative, right? But you know, it's really not good politics. And I think my colleagues and I are going to continue to try to ring the alarm on that, because I'm hearing across, you know, my district that this is a huge priority for them. And it's not just the impact it's going to have on public safety, but also the impact it's going to have on homelessness.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, these are issues
100%.
that we, you know,
100%.
Californians want us to deal with, and we need to fund it. So.
One more thing to think about in that context: this budget proposal includes to shut down another prison, another state prison. Since Newsom has been governor, there have been 3 state prisons shut down. This budget proposal calls for shutting down another one to save $150 million in general fund money. Now, I don't have all the latest statistics on prison population and trends, and to know whether, I'm not saying whether that's a good idea or a bad idea based upon caseload. One could argue that with all the increase in crime in this state, maybe they shouldn't be closing another prison. But set that aside.
I agree.
The fact is, he's identifying $150 million in general fund savings. Why then is he not taking some of that and redirecting it to fully fund Prop 36?
It would make total sense.
Give more money to the courts.
Yeah.
To give more money that are working with these felons in these treatment programs. Why isn't he doing that?
Yeah, it would make total sense. And, you know, I would quibble with his desire to close these prisons anyway. I think that we're going to wake up one day and we're, you know, especially with some of these new laws that have passed, and we're not going to have the capacity. We're going to end up in the same situation we were in 12 or 15 years ago on, you know, prison overcrowding, right? But that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
Well, I just really appreciate you coming on and breaking this down for us. This has been really eye-opening. We're going to shut it. We'll close on that because
Okay.
I think we've really covered a lot, and I think any more budget talk, I don't want people to
put 'em
lose
to sleep.
interest. You know what I'm saying? But this is important stuff. These are important conversations, and I think we've used this word before, but I love having you on to really demystify some of this stuff, because when you see the news stories, it's really hard to get a full grasp of what's really going on. So with that, any final thoughts before we
I
let
just
you
want
go?
to thank you again for the opportunity to come in and have this discussion. And I'm glad, it sounds like you found it helpful, and I'm really glad you did.
Absolutely.
And I just want to wish you and your colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and the governor, I want to wish you all good luck in crafting a state budget. And I hope we can do a little better than what we've got before us right now, but I wish you well.
Absolutely. Thank you. And look forward to having you on again in the future, hopefully. Our next episode, we're going to have one of your other colleagues in the advocacy space on. Chris McKaylee is going to be
Chris
joining
is great.
us.
What are you going to talk about with Chris?
We're going to find out. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, he does his McKaylee Minute now,
Yes.
so he's always updating people on what's going on. So we've been trying to get him back on for a while, and excited to have him on. So
That's great. That's great.
If you want to share ideas for future shows, you can email pointoforderpod@gmail.com. Obviously, listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and follow us on socials @pointoforderpod. And follow today's host on X, myself @Joshua_Hoover, and Tom @Sheehy Strategy. And check out the Sheehy Strategy group. I got to say that 5 times fast, see how that goes. So.
Thank you.
Tom, thanks so much for coming on, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you very much.
See you later.